Hey folks, it's Nate. It's time I got back to the drawing board, and today we're going to look at Norah's Saga Season 1, Episode 2. This is part of the latest round of Allegiance Arts comics, and it's an interesting issue to look at. Let's talk a little bit real quick about the art in here before we dive too deep into the story, because Kelsey Shannon has changed a bit from the first issue to this issue. I don't think that's entirely bad. I don't know how much sequential illustration Kelsey has done in his career. I know he's done a lot of cover art, and he's fantastic at that. But there are different demands on your time going from cover art to a full, 24 page inside the covers kind of work, and it demands different prioritization of detail. It requires different compositions, and it requires just a different sense of layout. And in the first issue, his layouts were quite good, but sometimes his pages felt like the detail was off, or he put the emphasis in some weird places. You can watch my review of that issue for more if you want more on it, but we really see that he seems to have found his stride. I don't know if he hadn't done interior work for a while, or if he had only ever done a little bit of it. But whatever it was, he seems to be dialed back into what he really needs to do to effectively communicate a story. And that's good to see, because the art in the first Norah Saga was a little bit rough. It was kind of muddy in some places, and some places that I felt needed more detail. It wasn't always there. I couldn't always tell emotionally what was happening on the page. He did a lot of his emotional communication through lighting, which is fine, but here we're starting to see more emphasis on expression, and he does, like, just look at the hand here. He does a great job conveying how hard she seems to be, holding this thing. This is not a person who is just casually holding the phone in a couple of fingers. You can really tell she's putting some pressure in there with the way her first finger joints are flexing, and he communicates this really effectively with just some light touches of color and some heavy inks. So I think, again, he was struggling in the first volume, or the first issue, to find that right mix of detail and lighting and so forth to really effectively communicate his story. Likewise, this page really leads the eye really great. We follow this curve around the outside here via the dialogue and the layout of people's faces that effectively just makes the page a breeze to read. All really good stuff. I think I would have given Kelsey's art a 7 out of 10 in issue 1, and here he is upgraded to at least an 8.5, maybe a 9, depending on your taste. So yeah, there's an improvement in the art. Not that it was bad before, but it really seems to have found what it wants to be in this volume. So let's talk about the story. The story in the first volume was very much to set up the character of Norah. We only really got to her situation at the very end of the book, where she was transported to the past, and we had an idea of how she was, what her challenge was going to be, namely surviving stuck in the past and perhaps finding a way to get home. And this issue tells us more about how she is going about those things. To give a brief recap, Norah fell through a lake after frozen lake in a car accident with her father. Her father was rescued by the Canadian authorities, and Norah was rescued by Vikings at some point in the past. So now Norah has to figure out where and when she is and how she's going to get home. And this issue tells us most of that. It also introduces a couple of other difficulties that she's going to face. Her first difficulty, which is actually introduced in episode 1, was that the local Vikings think she's some kind of a witch. She kind of gets her way out of that by accidentally really displaying this necklace that her late mother gave her that has Thor's hammer on it. They recognize that, and they think it means she has Thor's blessing, so maybe her magic powers are divine as opposed to from some kind of magic. And that kind of helps her to get the trust of Astrid and Torg, the two Vikings that found her. So now that we have that setup done, what is the dangers Norah's face? Well, the first one is this raid on the village, and it is done by the Volslag. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. The umlaut over the O always gets me. I'm an basic English speaker. We don't use umlauts a whole lot. So we have the Volslag. They're a danger, but they are driven off from the town, so they're just sort of an ambient danger. They're in the neighborhood. We know that, but we don't know how direct a threat they're going to be right now. We do know that the Volslag steal Ulfbert's sword. I don't know how significant that is because we really don't get a whole lot of exposition about who Ulfbert is or what the significance of his sword was, but it seems to be important because the Volslag raided to steal it. Specifically, we see that when this guy says he stole it. So that seems to have been their specific goal. Generally, we don't know what all that means, but that's okay. It's good to have some mystery plot threads hanging there. What we do find out for sure is how Norah can potentially get home. She's sent to talk to the village wise woman, the mage, because she seems to have left her actual name behind. It'd be interesting to know what the difference between a mage and a witch is. But we know why that might be the name she uses, because she's an acquaintance of another time traveler known as Ben the Slayer. And Ben the Slayer seems to have come from maybe somewhere in the 70s or 80s. He has a Walkman. I'm not sure when Walkman were introduced. But sometime in that time period, maybe early 90s. Although if he was a 90s kid, I would expect a Discman rather than a Walkman cassette tapes. Anyways, he has a Demon Slayer t-shirts, which is probably where his name comes from, a Rubik's Cube. So he seems to have come to the village at some point, some time ago. And at a guess, this indicates that the time travel is linear, i.e., Norah is going to spend as much time for every day that passes while Norah is in the past, a day also passes in the present. And I like this as a way to establish that because it's important to have these mechanics worked out. Like, is Norah going to be able to go right back to when she left if she time travels back home? Or is she going to have to, come back weeks or months later? And this heavily implies that she will arrive, weeks or months later because a time traveler who visited the village a long time ago also seems to come from a fairly long time ago in the present day. Long time, quote unquote, being, 10 to 20 years as opposed to, decades or centuries. I guess that is kind of decades, but point being, there is a synchronous time travel here. So that's interesting. And it's established very cleverly. I like that in the writing. We also know that Ben was trying to get home just like Norah is. And he was going to use something called Gadrock's Eye. And this is a gateway to the Yggdrasil, which will allow you to travel between worlds, or more accurately, between time. Who knows? Maybe it has other traveling properties. We don't really know for sure. But in order to open Gadrock's Eye, he required the Song of the Fosgrim. The Fosgrim being some kind of legendary music-making creature or creatures, I guess, based on the fact that it's the Fosgrim. I have heard the name before. I don't really know a whole lot about them. The image here and some of the other imagery I've seen of Fosgrim when he or they are mentioned suggest that he played the violin. I've always been a little curious about that since the violin is a relatively recent musical invention. I think it would predate the peak Viking era, but 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Maybe it's a instrument similar to the violin that we just call that for convenience. I'm not real up on the historical things here. Anyways, so Norah gets a specific objective. And this is good because Norah was a very aimless character in the first volume. But now we know how she can get home and what she needs to do to get it. And she has a way to solve the problem that no one else has had. Because apparently the song of the Fosgrim can only be played on the enchanted violin. And, unless you can get a Fosgrim to come and play it at Gadrock's High? Can you really do anything? Well, Norah has a unique tool that will allow her to do this as well, and that is her phone. The catch being that she has only half her battery life left, actually 49%. And so we have the ticking clock now. She has only so much time to record the song and take it back to the Eye of Gadrock and play it there. So that's great. She has a group of people. She has Astrid, she has Torg, the two she met in the first issue, and then we have Nandor the Destroyer, who is a strange person we don't really know a whole lot about yet. That's kind of true of most of the Vikings, though. So this is a pretty good issue. I enjoy the story. I like a lot of the setup it does. It does it very effectively, in my opinion, and you know, I can see where it's going. The question is, do I want to keep reading? And I think the answer right now is yes. But again, just as with Volume 1, there are certain things that I want to see in Volume 2 that could be deal breakers. And if I don't see them, I am going to probably drop out. The first thing I want to see is I want to see some kind of clear character arc for Norah. Is she going to be overcoming her wishy-washiness because she's kind of indecisive and easily influenced by those around her? Is she going to be trying to build a relationship in a specific way? Is she going to try and restore the relationship with her father? Is she going to try and get to know some of these Vikings around her? Is she going to become courageous? Is she going to become compassionate and more aware of the people around her? Because the accident she was in was caused by her being very self-centered. Some kind of clear character arc for Norah needs to be kicked off. Right now, she has a lot of different ways she could grow as a character, but we're entering into the second act. Remember, each season is supposed to be 6 episodes. So this is the end of the first act by any reasonable breakdown of the story. And I want to know what Norah's character arc is going to be. Also, I would like to get a better idea of who the people are around her. She's traveling with 3 Vikings specifically now. In the first 2 issues, she's met a whole bunch of different people, none of which have been developed very deeply. The deepest character right now is probably her father, who again is stuck in the present day, not in the past with Norah. So we need to get an idea of who the people around her are going to be. We know the most about Astrid. She's kind of your stereotypical tough girl. I'd like to see that unpacked some. Torg is kind of a surrogate father figure, but he's no more complex than that. And again, we don't know anything about Nandor. So really the only person we know right now is Norah. And in order to facilitate her character growth, we really need to get to know the characters around her better as well. So those are the 2 things I think that are going to keep me invested in Norah's saga as it's going forward. Again, it's a really well-written story. It's got a lot of great technical detail, and the way it presents the world and the way it tells us about the time travel mechanics, all very good things. And it has had a lot of legwork to do. It's got a lot of world building to do. It's had to establish a very complicated situation and dilemma for its protagonist. But it's done all of that now, and I need to start seeing those characters and that character arc taking shape, or I am probably going to drop Norah's Saga after episode 3. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, there's a like button and a subscribe button down below. You can use them as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.